Then check young to numb the young your mother, Teta will get about the canap the run and jungare, Yombege, Lord Linkorje, Mugu, young tabaji sausage, like your hoje, and somebody.
We turn now to the next song, which is on page 88 in the book. Again, this song has no title, so we just called it by its first line, which is Lord, Buddhas of the Three Times in Human Form. The first two lines say, Lord, Buddhas of the Three Times in Human Form, I bow from the heart to my protector, my root guru. In general, it is taught in Dharma that we should recognize our guru, our spiritual friend, to be, because he or she is the source of the teachings of all Buddhas, to be all Buddhas of the three times in human form. Especially in the context of the Vajrayana, we would go even further than that and say that the guru is the overlord of all mandalas and all Buddha families, for the reasons that were explained in the context of the previous song. Now this song is in fact a prayer written by Barway Dorje at the request of disciples that he names in the colophon, who asked him to write a prayer addressed to him. So in the next line he says, grant your blessing that having acquired a body with leisure and resources, and having met Dharma, I apply Dharma to my being. The situation we find ourselves in is one where we have acquired a human existence, a human body, that has certain special features. It has the leisure for us to practice Dharma, and it has both intrinsic and extrinsic or social resources that enable us to practice Dharma. Not only have we acquired this unique type of temporary existence, but we have actually met Dharma. The question now arises, what are we going to do with it? Well, the first thing that we need to understand is that our acquisition of this precious human existence, as it is often called, is not an accident. It is a result of our own good actions, restraint from harming others, and observance of some type of moral discipline in previous lives, as well as our positive aspirations. So, since we have this opportunity, which we have achieved through a conscious choice of actions in previous lives, we must not waste it. So therefore, the first real prayer here, or first real supplication is, grant your blessing that I apply Dharma to my being. Apply Dharma to my being means simply more than be involved with Dharma. We could be involved with Dharma and simply make of it a kind of adornment of our lives, a badge that we wear, or a costume that we wear, or a part of our social life. By applying Dharma to my being, we mean actually practicing it so that we change. Hearing the teachings and actually applying them in our lives to our behavior and through formal practice. The next stanza continues with reminding us of something else about this human life. It continues, since it is impermanent and destructible. Everything that is a composite is impermanent, especially, or most poignantly, human life is impermanent. Now, in general, impermanent can mean that something is not going to last forever. In the case of human life, not only does it not last forever, it does not last in the greater scheme of things for very long at all. Furthermore, we never know how long our life is going to last. There are a limited number of things that keep it going, and an infinite number of things that can cause it to end. The precise conditions that are necessary to keep us alive are so specific and so limited that the chances against our remaining alive at any moment are actually greater than the chances of our remaining alive. So therefore, not only is our life impermanent, it is easily destructible, fragile. It said, since human life is more fragile than a bubble appearing on the surface of rushing water, isn't it amazing that after breathing out, we get to breathe in again? The only difference between life and death is whether or not you breathe in one more time after breathing out. It's quite amazing. We should actually be surprised every time we don't find ourselves dead. So therefore, the prayer asks the question, what use is it to hold life to be permanent? We know that our lives are not permanent. Even more than that, we know that how much longer we have is utterly unpredictable. And yet, we tell ourselves a story. We tell ourselves the story that we will be different. We won't die. And we know that we're telling ourselves that story because that's how we act. If we really took impermanence to heart, we wouldn't act the way we do. We make plans, we assume that we'll be around next week, next year, 10 years from now. There is no basis whatsoever for that assumption. It seems quite as likely, at least, that we won't be around next week, next year, or 10 years from now. So what use is it to pretend that things are other than they are? Aren't we just asking for more trouble, more suffering, by pretending that what is impermanent is permanent? Even worse than that, our denial of impermanence prevents us from practicing Dharma. The only way you can practice authentic Dharma is through taking impermanence to heart. Denial of impermanence is probably the most effective way to prevent any authentic spiritual practice from ever occurring. So, this denial prevents us from doing anything meaningful with our lives, and it's useless. It doesn't prolong our lives. Pretending that we're not going to die, trying to distract ourselves from the evidence that we are going to die, does not prevent us from dying. However, as short as our lives may be, there is still something tremendous that we can do with them. And this is turned to in the next line, which says, "May I give rise to unremitting diligence." If we recognize that there is no time to waste, and therefore transcend procrastination and sporadic practice and become unremittingly diligent, in spite of the brevity of this life, we can accomplish a tremendous amount. We can develop bodhicitta, and by doing so, come much closer to achieving a state where we can liberate ourselves and others. He continues, and the devotion of complete trust in my holy Guru, the unfailing refuge. Complete trust in the Guru means unconditional, unreserved trust. You entrust yourself, your spiritual growth, your well-being, without reservation, without time limit, without conditions, and you entrust all of yourself, your body, speech, and mind.
Some meeting good Mark Tenhe Jirangi Samande, Yun Chu Yen the John Show, and gone Tenhin Tower Lama Je, Palm Babe, Terchen Barway Dorje La, Sam Hinkong, Rune, so on them. Palchen took ye Zonga tongue, Zonane. Palchen took ye Yezone, took die check the debatang. The Chima Bardor Tomje to Yap Gundu Yezin Chirang Chains, that day. Sam meeting good marine trolls, that Sam della Candechi over the Senang, announce you Sam della. Tani meeting good in there, Mount Tatatu, some getting Kora, some non da vote, Tini Kangati Yons, Zopatain the Kijoaris. That day, 10 the Jute marine to big rangeries. Ten Hijirangi summon days, Rangi, Gesan Kora, Tamba Sal, Tongi Rangi. Tinin their Mount Tata Tusum Gitakora, Nel would double take Golamando or Che. Jetang Kora Sem Tamba Tongi Rangi, Gesem Somate. They tola Yun Cho Yendo, Teni John Tobarho, Sita Malone days, that Cho Yendo, John Tobarho said you. That Cho Davojela Pay Chapayena, then they shot the Pavio days, shot the Pamdo the Capsula, Cho Koran Tatawa the Pavillon Yodi, Koran Chodembe, Yendola Koran Churi to Jepek Gon Pamdo Yodi. Palm dog yore, Ganaso that did the cups of Tatawara, raise some Davo yore, the Dick Jigla Tatawat in Rosawari, Depal and Rosawari, Tatawa the Pavung yore, Tini Mount Patination and Montreal in Dogo yore, and their Mount Tata to some gay. Kora ranking Kora Junda was the Pavilion Dogo yore, Mato Jigga, telling around Soge, Kora Choche, Reno Samba yore, the Teta Kora Yomari, Ranjik Pabdik yore. Yore the Cheke, the Hinda Voje, Tondeg yore, so the Pete, Yenda, Yun Cho, Yendo Jones, that Chotella Tateke, Nambanda watching around to Yopate, Yendola. Sam Garangi, Somatella, their mount Tata Tusum Galoy, Machi Bachin, Tatik Basamaka, Yambate, Andola, Jomar Shows, and so on. Wanting Jintava Lama Ye, but they came Baba Dojela, same Hinkon, same Hindu corner, so on days, Tango, Shandonaja, Tinchava, Sosu Gitava Lama. But they can Baba Dorje Tansin, Tella, Sam Incon, repeating that so on there by Pache to Yeshe Zone, to die children deba tongue, then a lame cosum toge, Chalan Nubakani, but the Tomjet Lang Lungai, some la children deba tongue, then it sent Dalla Yenaya, then the lame Jesus on the Jabatan, Chamala Yenaya, lame Jesus on the Jabatan. Paduk Nail Dabojilla Yenayang, the Nilamaki Jesus on the Pado Tamji to Jab Kundi Jesun Charang Chains and the Nikorang song. Said the chip Pado Tamji to said the Tan Delayante Saji Sashi Shoko underwater. Goba Chapel, check your days. Carnes and a tongue around so gay Tandege Jigdinla, Lulembic Capsula. mang chesho teke ngamda ndabo chesho te shiwa sinkin tela chek ngamda chimbon ndabo tang tene shiwa sinkin te tani ko malo ndabo tang shiwa sinkin te sam mlo ndabo tang shiwa sinkin te tene ngone tane chek khansao dogo ta soso ta mantin pagi nel ndabo chi yimbe ke doshin ndabo yore te tega tam chek reyo mare ngone tane soso ke tambi chola yang tabaji jesun jo top o te na yin ge ta ngone thane ge yun ringbo la nyamne zo thong ge khansa ta wo tang yun ringbo la sob yun zo thong ge khansa ta wo yin na tan do la pa do tho do tene pa do tho do song ba ta te yin do pa do ye lo song ba pa do som do song ba la so be ge pa do ge ne lu so yin do sob yun zo yin zo ya ge tap yin mang bo yo ba ri tonton nabo jela cha yapa yina yang one ke pardo te tabu ke ngamra jinchi mayin be thoni tene ta pardo tambo la kora ta kora khano chukungo nipa la longkungo suma la tukungo la sangye toba te tabu mataba yina yang sam yendo sepa nyawar zone tene simje thomje la pande la namme barte barchabe ki chedo La yayum tabu, Lama yayum tabu ke tukala timsu sambe goni, teni kora jewa len tabanda wo tende ke tapshi mambo yobare. Ta tapshi te jangware mato je ke teni mewa eri, te tabu la sosu ke rikpa te tukale kabore sambanda wo chi yimba yina yang, ta sosu ke tabu Lama chepa papa ten, te la sonde monlam zo, te ke Lama te ta, kora julu shatal pep yore te pep de kasolan tonge yore chalan deba soge yore tene one tane gindi chembo yung yore ta tere sadu kasolan jikten ge luso tela di chembo ge kanza chi yona shida samlo tang mago wa semge teng de sha tung chen da wo jing aran so ne ba cheba de baba yore is o te tabu sosu ge tabu lama de sha to ba yena Bardor la kase hiwa te tapo la soba gita hiwa shibju zanga bawa tando ngap jo se mambo yore tundon da wo je sam ma toba yina yang teni sosu ke tabu lama te kero la samlo tang toba yina yang te rang kita te tamche ke rangi te lama yinbi chen na teni lama te ki job toba da wo tende yunga yore tela tene deche Bardor tamche to sene labde ki yore
Didn't Yichung song?
Yichung endo con este Shuyavin. Sheba Concho Shakarin, no?
Lari.
Can Concho Shaka, Gemma Susan so Mambo Jishos and Gemma Susan so Ponap Tomon or Bardor Dorje never Gawar Church. Tenin the like I.
At this point, the prayer has brought up and dealt with recollection of the rarity of acquisition of this precious human existence, impermanence, and now an attitude of devotion and complete entrustment of oneself in the Guru. The next 4 lines deal with meditation. The first line says, "My mind that thinks this and that." Probably if asked to define what a mind is, we would say it's something that thinks this and that. Because much of what we experience of our own minds is our minds seeming to think of things without our having any control over it. Our minds wander, we become distracted, and so on. And as we know it, involves a thought appearing in our mind, and then leading to another thought, which leads to another thought, and so on. And we're largely unconscious of this process, and so it seems to be beyond our control. So therefore, in the next line it says, "It is misled by ignorance." It is because we are ignorant, unaware of our own minds, that they lack any control. In other words, when a thought arises, the mind is immediately pulled around by it, like something being pulled by a ring through its nose. So the supplication here is, may I cultivate, like a river's current, this fresh, self-aware cognition. The image here for a fresh, self-aware cognition, which we explored this morning, is the current of a river. The current of a river, when we think about it, we think of it as a unit, as one thing. We call it that river. And unless we're talking about it in great detail, we don't even differentiate between the substance of the river, the water and debris, and the current, which causes the movement or flow of that substance. In fact, though, if you look carefully at a river, it is not really one thing. The current and the river, while physically inseparable, are isolates of one another. The current is not the water is moved by the current. And also, when you look at a river, it passes through time. The river that is the water that is flowing through the river at a certain point, at any given moment, is not the same water that is going to be flowing over that same place in a later moment. So when we think of the river and current as one thing, we're really generalizing. In fact, would be more precise, rather than calling a river and its current a thing, to call them an instance of continuity. We think of the river as passing through time because of its similarity to that river as it was in the past. In a sense, you could say that the river of the present is the result of the river of the past. But it's not exactly the same stuff, the same particles. If we understand our mind to be like that, that will help us remain in the present. Because by identifying with the contents of mind, which are like the particular particles or particular debris swept along by a river's current, we are constantly living in the past, because we are identifying with or conceptualizing content of the mind in a previous moment. But if we rest in freshness, where the mind is simply aware of itself as it is in the present moment, then that is like recognizing the river's current as a continuity that causes different stuff. In the case of mind, different thoughts, different memories, and so on. In the case of the river, different particles of water, different debris, and so forth, to pass on through time. So this is the key to not being misled by ignorance, by remaining in the present, rather than attempting to follow one specific bit of debris, which in the case of the mind is a thought. The end of the prayer is a supplication to the Guru. Lord, Protector, Kind Root Guru, glorious Terchen Barway Dorje, I pray to you from the depths of my heart. Father, hold me in your compassion. Mix your mind with mine. What is this mixing? It means, may the blessings, influence, and inspiration of your body, speech, and mind enter my body, speech, and mind. Through doing so, may I recognize their nature and therefore recognize the nature of my own mind. Now, later, and in between embodiment of all refuges, noble Lord, hear me. Now, later, and in between here is very important. Now means in this life, later means in future lives, and in between means the interval, or Bardor, in between lives. And this is very important because this is the key to dealing appropriately with death. For most of us, our greatest fear is death. We are probably more afraid of death than we are of anything else. We are so afraid of death that we can't bear to think of it. Well, we're okay with thinking about the death of anyone else, but we're not okay with thinking about our own death. Because we view death as the loss of everything, the ultimate loss, the destruction of all of our dreams, of ourselves, of our entire world. We imagine that death is the end, and we can't bear to think of what that means. In fact, death is not that bad. It could be bad, but in and of itself, it's not the end of anything. Death is simply the separation of your mind from your body. Now, your mind does not end. Your mind continues. There is nothing in your mind that could end in the mind itself. So therefore, it can't end. As a result, we have many detailed explanations of what happens after death, such as the great liberation through hearing in the Bardor and so forth. And these texts are very complicated. They describe various stages of the dying process, the breakdown of the physical body, the unplugging of the mind from the body. They describe stages of what happens after death, the experience of what's called the fundamental clear light, then all sorts of visions, and then hallucinations, and then proceeding toward rebirth. They divide all of this into all sorts of categories, the 4 intervals, the 6 intervals, and so forth. They present opportunities for liberation. They say if you're a really good meditator, then you may be able to recognize and rest in the ground clear light after death. It's hard to have confidence that one would be able to do that. Or they tell you that you might see all of these deities, 42 peaceful deities and 58 wrathful deities and all sorts of colorful vidyadharas and so on. And if you recognize them as deities and don't find them threatening, you might achieve liberation. But we look at that with perplexity because we can't even remember the names of these deities, let alone expect ourselves to recognize them. We don't even recognize them when we see pictures of them. Or we're told that, well, if you don't recognize those deities, then you're about to enter a womb and you see your prospective parents copulating, then turn them into the father and mother guru and enter the womb in a state of great bliss. We can't even imagine what that involves or what it all means. So, with all of these details and all of this information, most of which we can't remember, some of which we can remember but not understand, and almost none of which we could actually put into practice, what are we to do? Well, the key to negotiating all of this plethora of complex information is simply this idea. The single instruction that will help you negotiate the process of dying, and dying is not optional, you are going to die, is this instruction. if you can recollect your root guru as you're dying and maintain that recollection, then that is enough. Your devotion for your root guru, your connection with your root guru, the blessing of your root guru, whatever you want to call it, that connection, that personal connection, will get you through the dying process. Does not involve remembering the forms of countless different deities whose names you can't pronounce. It's very simple and very effective. And above and beyond anything else, that simple line, now, later, and in between, is of the greatest importance in this song. So it ends, now, later, and in between, embodiment of all refuges, noble Lord, hear me. Hear me when I call to you now, hear me when I call to you after my death, and hold me with your compassion in future lives as well. And then the colophon, this was written by Barway Dorje at the request of several disciples, Kuncho Shakya, Gyamtso. Gyama is a Nongchinese, it means virtuous person, female, so it's a very characteristic Nongchinese polite term for a nun. And other disciples. That Kempo Tsocho Mina, Zamala Gyama Songdo. Yeah. Yeah, Nongchin Kere. Yeah, it's Nongchinese. He just confirmed it. May it bring virtue. Questions?
Yes.
Rinpoche, I seem to remember being told some time back that the Karmapa is our root guru. Is that correct? The 17th Karmapa would be considered our root guru? Or are you our root guru, or is Guru Rinpoche our root guru?
Lama Jayana, Simdok Lama Tik, Konare, that should you do you come a Kunzang, that Koran Junghong Ravokila Chai Java Yena, then the Koran founder Dick lineage at the Tambo, do you come a Kunzang Sunken Davo Chigla, Chai Java Yena, then the Chonasa Tigaran come Paris. Then the Chatang Takaju Che, Chung Yik, some of Tansoina, the so the founder of the Yorim, the Kerry in Bichabakan Yomari. Sav Lama, some of Tansoina, Tanje Kon, the Shubata, Satab Lama, Ja, Simto Lama, Chicks and get it. Okay, only that ranking in Iran, a Karachon Hako, Hamago, not Tom Talando, Marie. The girls are going Lama digging out the Cheval Sune. Same with Nelon today, she is something in a tatit or Lama send the degree. Matong, I in the corner that don't wish that love where your money.
Well, this is what I was talking about this morning when I quoted the common expression, although you may have 100 gurus who are on the bhumis, who are bodhisattvas, you will only have one who shows you the nature of your mind. And the short answer to your question is your root guru is whoever helps your mind the most. The reason why people are often encouraged to regard the Jawang Karmapa, Karma Kagyu tradition, is because the Jawang Karmapa is the rebirth of the founder of that tradition, Adusum Chenpa. So therefore, because he is the preeminent guru of the Karma Kagyu tradition, it's often encouraged to view him as your root guru. The other 11 branches of the Dokpo Kagyu, there are the 4 primary divisions and then the 8 subdivisions. Each have their own founder, most of whom have contemporary rebirths and so forth. But it doesn't work this way. No one can actually tell you who your root guru is. I couldn't say to you, your root guru is the Karmapa, or no, it's not the Karmapa, it's me, or no, it's not me, it's the Karmapa. anyone who tells you who your root guru is in that way is full of hooey. Because the only person who knows who your root guru is you. And your root guru is the person who points out the nature of your mind. You may have many teachers who are incarnate bodhisattvas or even Buddhas, but whichever one of them benefits you the most by pointing out the nature of your mind so that you recognize it, that is your root guru. And that's your business and only your business.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
You're welcome. Yes?
Rinpoche, what you said about death and dying, you made it so simple. And how come I've been hearing these talks for 30 years and it's been so complicated?
Well, basically it's like this. If you want to be practical and give people something they can really use, you can make it very simple. But if you want to just keep people coming back for more, you can make it very complicated.
Take a minute. Bardor singing the Kora, Bardor, my Nanjo Sangyong Java in Somari. Benata Kora Nanjo Parap, Ling Tamanda was to do one Tanegata, Kora Nelo Soy the door Yabega Kanzanda was in Atene Bardor de Lonjo Doku getting in Droverton, they began teaching Shepherd Papa Radio or the Mato Jiggy. Tela Bardor send Hida Yomari. Bardor making in orders. One digging tela Bardor Yomari, can Mando Chojores. One Tane Gita, Toba Niebeki or Tambatam Jela Bardor Yomari, Hina Pebni, then the Lonjo Zogu sort to La, Shabu Hip Jusekat de la Longu Cola Hini, then it could tell attack Zanging Deba Kadechon Yobasions of Batam Jete. And don't solve get to so then it take a jail up and a choke cook ranging all the yapena, Nima Coraland of a castle ranging in Nizra Kanga, the Nima ranging the challenge over the what? Pay taking the Latin is Conatopic got the choke cook wall and Royachi Mato Jiggy, tell a loss to by Yoma, in the castle of Pado, singing the Tawan in the Yoma, the one in Rodon. Zepik Loncho Zoku and Roberton Zepik too. Shepherd and Papa ready order. Oh, then it that my parking around so leg, yes, and Rogon Heke Kanzachi in his own day. That Pardo sing get the yard, that Pardo te jas and Bocale Cabo. Then it couldn't go new what in the Jazot and a thing, social like Palayore, Mazot and a thing, social like Palayore. So la then tag kona Lama Kandeji top matop, Deva Kandeji Jom Majong, Tenda Vola Leg the Mato Jaja Jatambata, Kona Neja Magic, that was in the kind of Malay.
The magic mepa the Kanasari, the Mengak Tom, Nepa song.
Ne Jala Magic, and that was in the kind of Malay. So you can develop a Yatan Chapal no the Mato.
The complicated explanations of what happens at dying and what happens after death are given to provide those who practice various techniques to make the best use of what they've practiced in that life during and after the dying process. And the reason for all the details given is that one or another phase of this process may be the ideal window or opportunity for that person, depending upon their training, to make the best use of that training. Another thing that we need to remember is that there are two types of people who do not experience, two types of beings that do not experience the Bardor at all. One is what is referred to in the saying, for yogins there is no Bardor, it is Buddhahood. What happens in the case of somebody who has achieved awakening in this life is that because they are living as Nirmanakaya, then when they die, it's like when the sun sets behind the mountains, the rays of the sunlight are withdrawn back into the sun. When the person dies physically, their Nirmanakaya is withdrawn back into the Dharmakaya. They remain in that state for a few days. Instead of the experience of the ground clear light, they're experiencing the fruition of clear light. And then when an ordinary person would emerge from that state, which for most of us would simply be unconsciousness, they don't emerge into the Bardo, they emerge into the experience of the Sambhogakaya, or body of complete enjoyment. And the significance of this from our side is that it is at that point, after an awakened being or teacher has passed away, that they are able to invoke the full force or majesty of their Sambhogakaya in blessing disciples. And then at a certain point, they will choose, typically we say after 49 days, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be exactly that. They will choose to take rebirth and produce another Nirmanakaya or many. The other type of person who does not experience the Bardo is somebody who's been really bad. A person who's done really, really terrible things will, at the moment of their death, immediately be reborn in something, in a state that is indescribably horrible, that is called uninterrupted agony or uninterrupted suffering. And they don't pass through a Bardo or interval in between. It's a direct transition. Therefore, the actions that lead to such rebirth are called actions of immediate consequence, because the consequence is immediate upon the person's death. As for how different practitioners negotiate the Bardo, in detail, the methods are different for each person. Like anything else, this can't really be one size fits all, because people have different capacities, they have different connections with different teachers. So it is in more detail, an individual matter. Rinpoche said there's no single medicine that cures 100 illnesses for this.
Yeah.
This is from a question online. Rinpoche, would you please talk a little about the importance of the heart in Buddhism? So many of the prayers and practices emphasize the heart center of energy, and I'm very curious about the associations with it.
Ning ne sowa de, ning kon rupe ding ne sowa de. Ngatso ning ke kesha mombo dos. De ngatso ke shata ki ning la se ki yanam, sem la se ki yanam, yanga ning ke chichi korlo la se ki yanam, kan la se ki.
Ta che chitang ki kora samlo tandang ki so ni rogo yori. Ta ngaran to chitang ki nupshon da bo chin na. O nge che train song sit ka so la lepa la du su dos. Then ta pho te ke ma cha te o ta ke train song se ke te la kin da. Du yori. Ta da lepa la du to de na re. Hina Zoto de Dare, one egg tembat, Nini Kana Yomari, one Taneg and Anna Circuit Tanda, Metin Gotin, Mesam Gosam, something he gets him. Tending Kovat and young in the Deba Yin gets up and Nello de Carre, not take Kora. That calling take it. Yenda was the target, your days. Your at the end, I am that tender chain, some of Tandan get on or Taning repeating said to Tonda, Mama take a figure your Sena. That ton the la that some of San in Jodo maybe gone. Tending on a Tanek Teba Purdus, Sunday Purdus, Tango on us. Teba Purdus so go under what you get. For a bed that would be Mato, King Nani, Chick Tong, you wonder what the naked Kayamari is. Yalla, Robatumbo send younger, Robatumbo said the King and Nala, Robat, yes, I would have to sing your body. Ben, Ning, Ben must be some to Chamber, Ning to Chamber go sing it in that double Ben Aquanda, what is.
That Kashi Babak, Lama Kashi, the Chibo Dumbo did so. You call Rupa your secretary.
No,
Kashi secretary.
that may that was in the mental. I also did it. Massive kind of
You're not any Nazare, Well, the short answer is that this, the use of the term heart in these supplications is metaphoric. It's used very much the way we use it in common parlance, and what you feel with, like my heart is broken, or I say this to you from my heart, or I say this with a heavy heart, all these kinds of things. In general, there is a bit of a difference in where we think. Most Westerners, Rinpoche said, when they say, oh, I just thought of something, will point to their head or touch their head. Most Tibetans, if they say, oh, I just thought of something, will touch their heart. Because Westerners believe, because of cognitive science and other reasons, that their mind inhabits their brain. Tibetans traditionally have believed that their mind inhabits their heart. Of course, the truth is neither. You cannot say that the mind, which is the ground of all samsara and nirvana, is exclusively seated either in your brain or your heart. Nevertheless, in this context, it refers to, somewhat metaphorically, to what we call your emotional intelligence, that which feels and thinks and knows and so on. So the use of heart here really indicates complete sincerity. Also, we use it to mean fortitude. We'll say, the Tibetan word for fortitude often metaphorically is a bone in your heart. And some people have thought that this meant that those with great fortitude, if you did a post-mortem on them, you'd actually find a bone growing in their heart. But that would not be a sign of fortitude. That would be some kind of calcium deposit characteristic of heart disease.
Okay, yeah.
You need the mic. You have an excellent voice. Your voice carries, but it needs to be recorded.
This question is presupposing that people that, other than the examples that Rinpoche gave of people that don't go through the Bardo, that most people do go through the Bardo. So, in reference to this song, which asks that our guru guide us now, in between and later, is there any kind of intentional prayer that I could say to my guru to assist my loved ones, my friends, that are not necessarily Buddhist, but in their passage in the Bardo? And also, what intention I could ask my guru to give me to help my friends who are Buddhists when they are in the Bardo?
Bardor Droya Menga La Din on the Dichi Bardor Tamchi do Tukjizung do Soda or Sota Yaris. This also saw the Papogi Jula Pengachi race. Dangatso ge Degan Anjendo Rangi Tawa Lamala Shenaki Pempele Soa Daya Yorebe. Nidra Shiva Kapsam Ingo Shepa de So Nampa Mahina. Gene did so Gatsuki Tawa Lamala Soba Dapne Konsuke. Shive Nekatla Pempake tapped out Kando Yori.
Tate one tane Tipa Chimbu Chul, Chepa the Papa, you can't know what it is. And an ananto ya Domba Donya Kausalani, Dada, 17 Tomchis and Road to us, Low Shoes and Doach, Chur Lambda, Tin on Dada, 17 Sogi Church in the Tomchis in the Wakayam and the was. 17 Tomchis said that Tanji going to Shubata would Nanke Kachap. Semjeng chap take catch up the letter Yomam chap segi yodi. That data was Semjeng Tamjela Kogi yodi, that so get data was some Lutana, then they manded by your mother teleping yodi. Kaga some Japan, Kaga some Jim and get the so Paro Botig leg and Debathon and Rogo Madon. They got some Japan and get the anti the Kalayodi.
Well, as a one of the main attributes of the Mahayana is that in all of our practice, we always include all beings. Any prayer we make for our own benefit, such as guide me in this life, future lives, and in between, we're supposed to make for all beings without exception, without any being being excluded. So that being the basic assumption, we can therefore use any prayer that we voice to the root guru for the benefit of anyone else. So we can pray for those who are dying, those who are deceased, and so on, using any of these means. The degree to which it will benefit them is indefinite. It will depend somewhat on their karma, but it will do them some good.
I'm going to kind of wing it here. I guess, I mean, I'm leaning towards asking you a question as it pertains to meditation, but I was also just thinking about being present. And I don't know how if I can formulate a question, but I'm trying to, we all, well, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but present as in your perception of the present. Because I feel like sometimes to be truly present, doesn't that require a certain awareness of what's going on? Like, because how do we know when we are truly present? Is that a good question? Okay.
Did it? Grandpa Soma, Date Shepa de la Security. Date Shepa, Chedon Song Hatsoke. Ngatso ke data ke nyanyo yina ngatso ke de dushe ke cha so ke dushe mangya pa ke cha yosares tropa do yonso dawa yensa mares den do ngatso ke date shepa de ngone jong nan no somba ke date shepa yina menam kandashi hako gere
tate kag hen de kala kabori Kahin the Kalakabor, same thinking that just in book Nelu today. Same thing get the here to cover the Rindo Carbon, Debek, G, Maji, Mount Park, and do Master Tatek, Sheba, caging my check, Segi order the caging my Koran alone choke the band of Mato Yomares. Koran Kora, caging Matanda, Shalom Mevala. Namto Yenda Chicketini, San Yaman, Sambu Namto Yaman and Yambet Namto, Namba Nato Chicken Gola, and Rosa Wachimato Chickishida, Yomari, tea in the capsula, then in Daddy Segona, this Kangi Yokenda was radio days. In a young, then it thing more since you never done Maris. Namto, Chukur Sumbashi, Somalis. Namto Sinket and Gadik, Samno Tanto Capsula. gom chebar ji chwa yena ta tela nam to tawani ne meva na tong e yemada wochi go yobanda wochi samlo yode tinde tan maro nam do singete ngone thane ke kora khase yena ya sha rongwari khase yena ya ga rongwari tene nam to ge yudo khase je so yona nam to ge ngo je ta se de kapsala ta ran soma se yode kora ote kora chue ko ge ran yin de nam to ge je se man do ne te ge ngana ne thoba che yina tene ngone ko chu ko ran je re de yode de na ya ta kanga te pata mogutan tene kora gom ge lam ni ndo kong hi lama da lama phen du ke je hi ndo kong ke re ma to tan de da se ne tan da lam sa ten ko na te ayo ke je kale ka bo yode.
It's very hard to talk about this with any real precision because anything you say about it can be misleading. When we talk about the mind, we say all these things. We say, don't prolong the past, don't think about the past, and don't beckon the future, don't think about the future, and don't conceptualize the present. Rest in the direct, non-conceptual experience of the present moment. And we say all these things. But the problem with all of this talk is that the present moment has no duration. The present moment is simply the border between what's past and what's future. So when you say rest in this, how can you rest in something that doesn't seem to really exist? So it sounds, when you look at it that way, it sounds like meditation is always going to be chasing after a train that's already leaving the station. And yet, it's not like that. Because while the present moment has no duration, it is always there. In fact, nothing else is there. It has no duration, but nothing else can exist. A past thing cannot exist, a future thing cannot exist yet. So it's not unreachable. It may be easiest to recognize it in the context of thought. So let's talk about thought. At the beginning of every session, when we recite the lineage supplication, we say, the nature of thoughts is Dharmakaya. Now that means that if you look directly at the thought that is present in your mind right now, and you look directly at it instead of using that thought to jump to another thought, instead of following the thought, what you will discover is the Dharmakaya. But it's not that cut and dried. It can't be taught, to large bodies of people because it has to be explained to each person in a different way, individually and privately, according to their own particular experience, their own use of language, their own training, background, and so on. So it can't be mass-produced. But, simply put, if you look at the thought that is present in your mind at any given moment, rather than following that thought, that's it.
Okay.
So I have 3 questions from online.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is I'll do one question, see if there's anyone here who wants a question. So, and if not, then I'll do the next question.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is, hi, in terms of testing the Dharma to have faith, it is said that the Dharma is the truth about reality perceived directly by the Buddha. In this age of science where there are many points of view, how do we confirm that the Dharma offers up a true picture of reality, and how important it is to confirm its personal, and how important is it to confirm it personally?
Dampe che the longsong ke lenju mendoso. Takche tong ne. Then so gi ngeshe. The rimje chagere so. Ta che don se ding song ga tso ke zenre ke sha mongbo yore. Zenre ke lo zhong ang to tsu yore. Zenre na yang. Zenre takche tong ma ke tap la tun na yang. Konse ke drupta matum pa mongbo yore. Then the nga tso ke what was the last part?
How do we confirm that the Dharma offers up a true picture of
Then-
reality, and how important is it to confirm it personally?
Then the nga tso ke ngane so ke nyam nyong to ne. Dampe che de ngane demba yin. Nelok manarwa tongi yin. The kanda hako ge re down. Then nga so ke rang to ne hako go do.
tate cho jing samno tana tese kambol keden da win was cho jing samno tana le savondo was pena sanje ke song de galon ta kam ke nam che legwar ta la ngai ka song was tene te sanje ke ka ra te la ta je tan je wa ma ta mango je la ta je tan ya mar was sende ina ta ta ja ta mango ta je tan de was 나랑 속에 따제 땅야데 산제게 송 비추데 나이 가스는 송마리 다테 산제랑게 샤네 송아텔레 마도지가 다 산제게 나이 가 송도데 샤리포게 가텔라 따제 땅고게 세완도 텐데 마르와 산제게 가테랑 나 따제 땅용데 가스나 세게다베 세겐도 따제 땅용데 테네 ngone테렌도데 그바치 송아도 te yendo yesun yoba yonzo ge ta koran ma chekho te ke ta sanje range ka de she ne de de yode ma to so so ke invent che gale te kombo was ta tan me se ne tren khatan ji den dal she go ka le de do de na ta ngone ta be sa on sanje ji ka de ngone ta ne go yode te indu ka so la te la ha jang ge complicated te mele da wo honde ge do.
Well, I'm not sure that the answer and the question are in the same ballpark, but I'll say what Rinpoche said. Well, from one point of view, this seems very complicated, but it's quite simple. When the Buddha said, monks or other wise people, do not accept my words based on my having said them. Test my words as assiduously as you would test gold before buying it. He specifically referred to his words, so what he said. He didn't say my words and Shariputra's words and Madhgalyayana's words. He meant his words. So the stuff that you need to analyze and see if it fits your experience is limited to what we have recorded as the Buddha's actual statements or acceptable explanations of them. And so it's not that difficult to do simply because there is one person doing the tests and there's one person who produced what is tested. Okay, next question.
Anyone else?
No, let's get you. You've got the mic, so it's just easier if you do those three and then we hand it around.
All right, well, I've already got another one coming in, so... all right, can a genuine recognition of the nature of mind emerge gradually over time, or is a certain recognition always sudden and self-confirming?
Senji nelo ngoshe paam topa sabate remje yong sigirepe yana kechik chila yongwarepe.
Remje pa yong sigiri, diksha pa yong sigiri. Ta terang pa mawate.
Could be either. There are some who recognize it gradually, there's some who recognize it all at once. Next.
Okay. All right, so here it's actually one person. I'll do the second question because it may be better of what he said. Rinpoche is answering a lot of questions now about death and dying. He asked to ask Rinpoche to talk more about it, but you have. So now he's asking maybe just the moment of death, what to do, just expounding on thinking about our root guru. I think that's a question.
Okay. Then so ge ngane shiwe kapso jumpa ma shoba ge gone samlo toya yakshe de zavela marebe.
다 대양 양바 체존라래게
Loso.
배나 가라서 바드나나 송용 요리 이게 어사다 남조사세네 송도 봐 당가난서 솜보체네 데이터베 갑슬라 담보 잡슨데 메domba 쇼네 코라티니 렘베 현돌라 페나 혼도 닝고 소니 손데 렘베 현돌라 메세텔라 쇼 양데야 드바 조데야 냠네 조데야 용스도바 탐제테 람조 살레 장바소 요니 라곰바 나다와 제름조 조링조 안도도 용스도바 탐제테 다 람조 살레 장바소 요데 람조 살 쳇바 젠제 용켄기 강사 이나네 이제 요사데 향운데 갑살라 데니 호살 마운데 세운데 갑살라 라인 코라 마타 폰체바타도 라티니 코란테 ng으스네 테가랑게 네로케 소소랑고 통도케 요 어때다고 간사 통 맞aukin 파자리 콘도 휴바타도 바주 로주 통도 히다 이제다 닝그 삼로 땅 맞aukin 다보지 나탄 탐사다 효데 테레
It depends upon the individual's training. In the context of death and dying, we talk about the ground clear light and the path clear light. The ground clear light is the nature of things, the ground of being, and it is experienced directly or nakedly at the moment after death. All of our training on the path, starting with the refuge vow and the preliminary practices and yidam practices and all the meditation, is all done in order to familiarize ourselves with the clear light. And the clear light with which we have become familiar in this life is called the path, clear light. If our familiarization with the clear light, with what we call the path clear light, is sufficient, then on the basis of that familiarization, we will recognize the ground clear light as soon as it appears. And that's said to be like a child recognizing her mother and immediately jumping into her or his mother's lap. If we have not been trained enough to do that, then the best thing we can think of at the moment of death is our root guru, yes. So there were some questions. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So here is the prayer that Rinpoche just explained, page 88, a prayer that today's students who have Rinpoche as their root guru can recite, maybe using Bardor Rinpoche's name of Terchen Barway Dorje? Or are we just to use it as a learning vehicle? I understand that the prayer was written specifically for certain students rather than us. Is there more than that we can do with these songs to help our progress on our path? Besides learning from them and implement them as Guru, as Rinpoche is urging us to do, especially since they were written by Rinpoche, who we have a connection with.
Yeah, that really comes down to the one question, can we use this as a supplication? Yes. There are a couple of other questions, and also, Elizabeth, were you satisfied by the answer to yours? I think there's a little bit, we didn't quite get it yet.
I think that I probably asked a question that didn't need to be asked.
No, I think I'm not satisfied by the answer either, so we'll try it again after the other ones have gone. Thank you.
Who is it? Somebody here? Yeah, go ahead.
He had one, and over here too.
I had a question toward the end of this page 88 Doha that we're looking at, when it references, Father, hold me in your compassion, mix your mind with mine. There are references in different places in Buddhism about mixing, the guru mixing the mind with the student. Can you say a little bit about that by way of explanation? What's really being talked about there?
Lama tok dong ramsem par sewam yerme sewa de ngone yana kala se yore.
Tan de la pa hops kala tena. Je kwan dam da ni chala tu tan te ko anda wo. Tende je ke pa je do shen da wo je le bu do wa. Yena tende re yo ma de step na la me ke tok te ya tong ba ran yin de. So se ke sem tan ya tong ba ran yin de. Te yin de ka sa la pe na tan de ke ka yu te tong ba yin na. Tene kora toa je jam de ka yu te ja na. Di na le yo pe ke tong ba te ran yin ke kora nong ha tong ba lan den do ke de le de ge ma de. Kora ran shu ke te dan de sa wa de ma to che ke cha la tu tan de ko anda wo ten de san yo ma de. Te yin de ka sa la ran sem tong be ke ne lo kan yin ba te ke yang ta pe ne lo so yin do lan tong yo ke ka sa la la me ke to da ye me ban de sa wa de ta te la kora te turn te kora sa cha tong go be che de la te ne ye me to de se wa da ten de da bu ke ta sik je pe jo ta ne la ki yo de ma to ta sik de de ban da wa de.
It's this notion of mixing your mind with the mind of the guru is somewhat metaphoric, and it's a metaphoric image that is used because it speaks of devotion. Of course, literally, when you say mix your mind with mine or mix my mind with yours, it sounds like you're talking about a recipe. 2 parts student's mind to 3 parts guru mind in a large mixing bowl, and you stir vigorously. It's not like that, obviously. What is the guru's mind? It's emptiness. It's emptiness that knows. What is your mind? It's emptiness. It's emptiness that knows. So what would the mixing of those 2 things be like? For example, if the cup on the table in front of me were empty, and I smashed the cup, the emptiness inside the cup and the emptiness outside the cup would mix. The only thing that's keeping them separate is the presence of the cup, the shell that the cup forms, intervening between the space inside and the space outside. I wouldn't have to stir them together to mix the emptiness inside the cup, the space inside the cup with the space outside. So, in that way, when you recognize the nature of your mind, you recognize the nature of all minds, and therefore you recognize the nature of the guru's mind. And so therefore, we call recognition of the nature of mind mixing your mind with the mind of your guru.
Penna ndela tik te le sa wo do as penna pengin jombar dam bo song be ge nom to ngo chukur song ba yin sen song do as ta ngaran so ge lamme ge to chu chu ko re se ke len len kha le yo do as ta ngaran se nom to ge ngo ta ko da nyomo de ta be ge nom to ge ngo de chu ko yin na tene chu chu ko ra ni me be jum se ka ya ma do as ta ten da wo pen sa de.
Maybe this will help. When we read the lineage supplication, we read that Bangar Jampo Zampo, who wrote it, tells us the nature of thoughts is Dharmakaya. And for most of us, when we first read that, we find that hard to accept. We think of thoughts as our problems. And the thoughts that occur in our mind, those couldn't be Dharmakaya. But that's what he's telling us. But it's much easier for us to accept, the Guru's mind is the Dharmakaya, because we respect the Guru more than we respect ourselves or our thoughts. So if it's easier to first recognize the Dharmakaya as the Guru's mind, then it can be put that way. There was one over here. So this one? Okay, you're next.
Earlier you had mentioned about dedication and diligence and hard work. And I was just wondering, if you're just meditating every day and you're just being a good person and compassionate in general, what comprises the gap between that and being really hardworking and devoted? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. Okay. The Sunju shuk champo dang mugu shuk champo go so che dang so de gawa gang tup tu zogen tikpa gang tup tu pongen dang gong tup tu gang tup tu jabken de sam degre pe yana de lakwa kare go to che dang so de hachang sondru champo dang hachang mugu champo ge kesha mare de la yaga kare go to
다치 코란 배전들 야 공네 공배선 로그리 다 당보 소주게 코란 가리 토톰다 보지 클럽종소 가리 토톰다 보지 냠네 소위나 테네 람지 rem바 생겐데 공네 공들라 파야요데 테네 소소르 때 사지 다 큐틱 하코베게 된다 보지 랩 tene nyamne gosan do sambekin dumba dawo che chona tene ketem de ba yen do dawo te paya yori.
It's a gradual process. It starts out the way you described it. We start out by doing what we can and doing the best we can. But at a certain point, as you go through various stages of practice, you catch the scent of Dharma. It's like, I mean, it's a different analogy than he used in Tibetan. He used the analogy of warmth. You like when you're playing, am I warm, or like getting close to something. But it's a little bit like catching the scent of something you're pursuing. You start to catch the scent of Dharma, and then you'll naturally find, and your devotion naturally growing.
Thank you.
Was there one over here somewhere?
Debbie?
Was it Debbie? Yeah.
Rinpoche, I'm a little confused over the root guru idea, and I may have missed something earlier in the discussion, but I'm wondering if you have been in the room when pointing out instructions have been given and you've not recognized the nature of your mind, is it possible to pray to a root guru? I mean, if you're given instructions to pray to a root guru, how does that work?
So there are two ways I can understand your question, and you may be asking both of them, or neither. One is, if I've been present when the pointing out instruction has been given and not seen the nature of my mind, does that still make the person who gave it my root guru?
No, I'm not asking.
The other one is, another one is, if I was present at a pointing out instruction but did not see the nature of my mind and therefore do not have a specific root guru, to whom do I pray?
Yes.
Okay. De da ngotru sabate kashe la de nyong. Semgo thoma sons. Den de mixa ke tsawe lama de drupchu ke lokso shendo de senhi ngotru ken ke tsawe lama yomare. Den de sawe lama la sowata you can pray to all the gurus of your lineage. Now, do you want to try again? Come on. Because
I kind of felt like it was sort of like, well, you see the agony of somebody dying and you go, well, you're on your own, I've already prayed for you.
The egg? I don't get the egg.
It's like
the agony. Oh,
the
okay.
agony, and then you're kind of like, well, listen, you're on your own. There's nothing I can do. I've already done it, or you know what I mean. I just felt a little like I was lost.
The donla de lende morong tet strumas. That donla de mishina shiva kapsa consola robozo tap yaksha kando yore.
Robot tai yaksho te ta genetic don.
Well, probably the best thing you could do would be to do the Chenrezi and Amitabha practices for that person. But he didn't mean that you've already prayed for them casually beforehand. He meant that you can use any prayer for the benefit of another person when they're dying.
I think ultimately the question was answered in that what I'm getting, rethinking the answer, is that actually the bardo is such a very personal thing that it's not like your prayers don't help, but it's really an individual's life that constitutes what the bardo experience is.
The kansa soso ge ngola Bardor ge nangwa the mandrawa soso wa yorebe. Well, there's said to be a great deal of conformity in the appearances of the Bardor. Consistency, I would say. Different beings are said to experience it in fairly similar ways, if that's what you're getting at.
Okay, I don't know why I'm having trouble with this. What am I not seeing? It's just
I don't think it's that you're not seeing something. I think we're not really understanding your question, which would be my fault. Are you asking how much influence can we have over somebody else's dying process, and how much intervention? What degree of effectiveness will any intervention we do have?
To lessen the suffering.
Suffering.
Period.
Yeah. Dona konso ke paropo shive kaso dunga chungdu tangwe ta yapshe kando yore.
Ta manam jayatri. Kate to motop de ta social ra legeri fusongas. Kate ke chembore de yore. Palchen morati tan go begunwa. Pena chol tsepa yonkin mugu yonkin lama lo tsepa yonkin mugu yonkin yena show cha pin to re. Pena meji nima to go yona nima na yonga yena nima to the level was. Meji nima to go yona.
Laso.
Nima na yona. Nima to take pin to was.
Laso.
Nima to go na tene chela mayona do dena. Nima to the lego mother was. Then pets and I get it, Tepat the Mugu Mepeke Kansachi, Tashinke ina. Then it Lama the Togi Meva Marete, Nimanala, Mayona, Nimeke, Kona Trade Lego Marete, Petenda, whatever was.
Yes.
Kona Soso la de Kona Posig Salamando ina. Then it takes the port to Gona Galekabo young was.
Basically, it all comes down to praying for them with as much love and compassion and concern for the person as you can muster. But the point that may be troubling you, he said, is that how much effect our prayers will have for a dying person, that is somewhat individual to the person. And the reason is that they could be more or could be less open to the assistance of your prayers. If somebody has faith and devotion of some kind, then they will benefit more from your praying for them. And if they don't, they'll benefit less. It's like if somebody wants to be warmed by the rays of the sun, but refuses to go outside, the sun's light is not going to get them, because they want something that they're refusing to expose themselves to. If somebody wants to be warmed by the rays of the sun and steps outdoors on a sunny day, then they'll succeed. So you can provide that person with prayer and the benefit that prayer can bring, but how much benefit it does them really depends upon their attitude.
Do you mind if I just go one more?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So then, I think most of us are familiar with people in our lives who have mental illness. There is a blockage in that mental illness to a prayer or to a blessing or to the Dharma, right? So when that person is dying, is that really their karma that will either take them into a mind that has more clarity?
Okay, yeah, okay. That hakoso. Morange buge de. Dere da mi nyomba yana. De nyomba ke tsari ke ta de yana nyomba de lupo ke de tsage chone singa. Dendo de nyomba de so shibe kaso sem drag the dogere sem duk the dogere kandare do.
Ta tande gel lutin de gnan yobe ke kapsula lutan debe ke goni ta sem de nyo sinke ke min ta yori ma to sem tong wala nyo de menyo sinke de tawari shen dobe kapsula sem de lutan tarsa wari luk yate ne tarsa de kapsula Sam tela to Junge Ripale, Gunjur Songendo, the Junior Songendo.
Gujur Songito. In Gujur, the Gujurs and a Mompo pay up Mato Gu Chipu Konamare, Pena Maton Gutong, Gujur, don't I think Mompo Sawayo?
Ting Mambo Sa.
Mompo Sawayo.
Or Terege Yoria, then they take a capsule like Herapti, Shepard the Papa Yori, Hirakaleo Matis.
When someone is suffering from what in this country we call mental illness, or from some kind of cognitive deficit produced by whatever conditions, from a Buddhist point of view, this is all physical illness, not mental illness, because whatever the limitations on the person's mind, they're caused by the structure of channels in the brain or other places. And so it's a physical illness that manifests mental symptoms. The mind itself cannot be ill, because the mind has nothing within it that can get sick. A consequence of that is that as soon as the person's consciousness separates from this physical body, they'll be instantaneously freed from their former mental illness or cognitive deficit, because that's actually a physical illness that has affected or limited their mind. So the person will immediately become not only clear as they were capable of being minus the deficit or mental illness, but in fact their mind will be, it's said, 9 times clearer than during a life. Okay.
With no question, somebody had a follow-up.
Okay.
First you have to say salsa.
Because it's not me.
Tomge, tapalagidas, moge de toya seltzer laptang, then it de gatap salsa yoro, then you laptang, then moge de lumba gadake, the chickbad. The joke is that Naomi's husband likes to force her to say salsa and seltzer, one after the other, because in her accent they sound to him the same. So would you please demonstrate and then say the next question?
Everyone can have a joke. Salsa and salsa. It's nearly.
The first one was something you drink?
Yeah.
Salsa
No, salsa.
is, okay, yeah, all right. Oh, good.
Okay.
I could hear the difference. How many people could hear the difference? See?
There you go.
All right.
look-
So you
and
take
I'm
that
sure
home to Tom. Okay, now the question.
So the vote is for me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll go back to Sarah. So we're going back to the heart using the
Yes.
heart center. So on one level, yes, I'm interested in the heart as a chakra energy center and receiver of the Guru's blessing.
Mm-hmm. That's it?
Yeah. So that's the part of where she wants to know about the heart.
Okay. You know, the ngaso gi ning sa wa de pena zowa dang samlo tongwa kona mayimba ngaso ke zalung ke kaso ninga chuchi kolo sa wa de yore. Yes?
Yeah.
Says yes.
Yeah.
There is a heart center.
Yeah.
He agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry, because I can't. I mean, she can hear it, so she
Right.
wants to.
All right.
다던도 교독다 다른 통과체 용의 가서 계좌에 맞다 단단한도 시다면도
Says the context in which it's appropriate to start talking about energy centers, including the heart center, is when you get to the 6 dharmas of Naropa and the physical exercises. That's not under discussion here.
Okay. Well, that's.
yeah. Yes.
Thank you for the. Is this on? Okay. Thank you for the teaching, Rinpoche. So I have a question. So when you said it's sufficient at the time of death to think of your guru, and it's about as good as it gets. So we've been taught in some other teachings when you go to sleep, you can think of your guru in your throat.
No,
Or
that's when you eat.
When you eat, oh.
Yeah, in the heart when you go to sleep,
in the
above
heart.
your head when you're sitting around, above your right shoulder when you're walking, and in your throat when you eat.
Sure. So, at least when I try to do that and I fall asleep, I almost always get distracted and completely lose it.
Yeah.
So if if it's that hard, if it's that difficult while falling asleep, I imagine it's even more difficult when you're dying. So, is it enough to keep it going as long as you can, and then, or
the susu shive do so zawe lama de la semtena de yapore so so. Chidon so ngatso ki ni che lamche la de zawe lama ninga gomju dein. Yenang de ni la do ka so ni ke wonge sem kala yingne de sheda yunren po sa tap tokumendos. De ni la do ka so re. De le chang susu shive ka so de nyota zabo yo sares. De endo de Zawe lama semla sapa rentopa shiwe kapsi yongere.
Ta kale kom na yongere. Mago na kale ina kale kawo yode.
If you get used to doing it, it'll get easier. But if you don't try, it won't.
thank you.
Okay, so back to meditation. So you say there's a line that says, my mind that thinks like this and that, and seeming as if we have no control, that we're largely unconscious of our process of thoughts. And then another thought arises. When meditating, I don't know if I just have very simple instruction, which was just to watch the mind, and that it eventually will get tired of itself. Just let it do its thing. So I find that when I watch thoughts, or almost like a cinema, sometimes it's a movie, that I'm a spectator of something that's being projected. And but a friend of mine here at the Dharma Center had said to me to think about trying to understand or try to watch the person or who is watching. Like I'm saying, like I'm watching, or my mind is watching. I don't want to get complicated. I keep it very simple, but when he told me this, it made me feel a little bit complicated. And I don't want to be complicated. Mm-hmm. But is there like levels of meditation that you get to eventually? Like, do you need training to go?
Tere, tata de moronge de gomtri kane go so mishi. De semge de namto ki junde de kale tasho se. Tene sem ke namto ke junde halam bisko ke temotawa nangjenes. Yana tene chutso de la yopa ke miche mola lapsons. De tsandamaze taken ki yuchen ke shepa de la tas sebuche yois. De tsam tropa mawarese.
Te kala songo da ya wo ni ko mo da.
Da mogi se de mogi nika de ke zaborato domote de namto chiksha dro de mutune tayares te motawana de kai mishi nipa de temo takenge shepala ta sabachi
Hande da
Nicola ngoshia ke keshamendo nika de
temo tayanda bore
temo tayada wa
che tang ndi na song ya nam do ngo la ta song na ta te nam do khare che song yi na te ngo la ta te khoran do song na ye da khare che song na te ngo ta ya te la gu yo de ma to bese kon da mo te ya te la gu yo ma de ma mun te ya la gu yo.
It's not supposed to be like watching a film where you're watching a succession of images and so on, because in that case you're watching the content of thought. The instruction, Rinpoche said, at least in this context, is when a thought arises, while it's there, to look directly at it. When you look directly at it, you're not looking at, it's not like watching a movie where you're following this spectacle. You're looking at it while it's right there. And directly looking at it doesn't mean looking at its content. It means looking at the stuff of the thought itself. I mean, we say looking at its nature, but it means what is the thought? What is really there? Not what's the thought about, but what is it? And if you look directly at that, you can only do that as long as the thought's there. As soon as the thought vanishes, then there's nothing to look at until another thought arises.
But doesn't holding the vision on it make it stay?
No, no, it can't.
Penna beti yana le mola. Penna chola lab do was. Chola lab de yongres. Te jela lab de yongres. Te jela lab de yongres. Par mache ba yongres. Ena Tanji galap te tande galap maris. Tande galap te taya lap saba lemke te kam maris. Te kanga te kona lap saba janya res. Tata keji tata wa galap janya re mato. Dep lap te dosa wa te samutanga ya yo maris. Mao pa galap te yungjo re a te yungre a te samutanga o maris. Mao pa tanda yope galap te samutanga yo re te tata yope galap te lapte ya yung ne man dosa du dosa wares ta te da wo che ge sem ge nam to te jing do ji sha de jing do ji sha ge yo de ka de sha de ge ngo te le de song ge yo de ma to do de yung ge tin la sam tang go yo ma de.
A common analogy for this is waves on the surface of water. Waves are somewhat similar to one another, but they're not the same wave. Each wave, waves appear in a succession. First there's one wave, and then that subsides, and then there's another wave, and so on. Each wave is new, and the problem with trying to watch it as watch the succession of thoughts is you're following each thought as it goes. You don't want to do that. You want to remain in the present. And as each thought appears, like a wave on the surface of water, then you look at it, and then it disappears, and you look at the next thought, and so on. So you look at the present thought.
No,
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not one.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm doing that.
You're talking about the second part. It's weird. Takengi shepa de la tago gudoi.
Thanking sheba se.
De pache de shini dan latung tets truk do sang.
Mani te ta singe te ta so se ge sem go nam do te song go yo do.
Lasa.
Te ma to yanda ta to en khan do me do wa.
Samsa menga kashi ne de namto ke ngo Lama ta namto ngo sheken ge rekpa la ta la so ba yore de morange de dambo suge lapsong kan lapsong de tsane ha ko go do morange ke sha ya poko to the tab there was on. I mean, there is an instruction at a certain point to look at the recognizing awareness rather than the object of recognition, but we don't know who said what to you or where this is coming from. So basically, the simplest thing is just when a thought arises, look directly at it.
Yeah, that other thing was messing me up.
Yeah. For now, that's
Yeah.
enough.
Thank you.
Sorry, there is one more.
Yeah, that's it. Tamani.
So this will be the last salsa, the last dance.
Tom said I exaggerated. That's why I can hear it. Okay, so if one has a pet who is passing but they are suffering, is it best to take them to the vet and help them pass? Or is it best to stay with them, do not take them to the vet, but just tap on the top of the head and say prayers?
In other words, is it better to kill them or not kill them?
Yeah.
Yeah. That the longpa de ge loksa la so doctors on my ke dundro pet sava de natsa dopo ya de shibe de semen te ke loksa yarwa masena ga de be
Tati gajiri.
lasa. It's better not to kill them. Oh, lasa.
Oh, that's all. Sonam de ye tam de
Zeba nye tane nye
dana panje ne
chega na je bala
ye
Sibe Zole Rowa Rowa
Yawan de Jewo Sona
Yeshe Zozo Sonam Yeshe Le Zhongwei Damba Gonye Damba Je Ma Je Ma Nam Je Je Ma
Nyamba
Ne Ba Dong Gong
Kone
Gong
Kondam Pe Wara
Je Ne Dong Dong Ba Sho Chan San Ba Kan Da Sa Yo
Teta Kwanje Mala Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I know. I'm in trouble.